He had it right. James is an OG with the Mob Power rules, and he told Vlad that Poochie was a hitter for real.
Was Poochie known as a shooter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a hitter for real, for real.
Okay.
The music world is numb today, stunned by the violent death of gangster rapper Notorious B.I.G.
Notorious B.I.G.'s mystery finally cracked open in 2025, and the truth hit harder than anyone was prepared for. The secrets that slipped through the cracks for nearly 30 years and roared back with names, motives, and details people tried to bury. And now that everything is out in the open, the shock is spreading through hip-hop like an aftershock nobody can escape.
Including his late friend Christopher Wallace, aka Notorious B.I.G.
Police investigate the deadly Wilshire Boulevard ambush of Notorious B.I.G.
The thing about Biggie's case is that people stopped expecting answers a long time ago. After 28 years, it felt like the world had quietly agreed that his murder was just another tragedy lost in paperwork and politics. But then 2025 came in like a storm and cracked open everything we thought we knew. That silence we got used to, it broke. And what came out of it wasn't comforting. It was dark, messy, and honestly worse than the conspiracy theories fans argued about for decades.
Russell Poole was assigned to the case, and after a few months of digging through evidence, he started accusing a cop named David Mack and his friend Amir Muhammad of being involved with the hit.
What shocked everyone the most wasn't that Biggie's killer had a name. It was the fact that this name wasn't new. It had been sitting in files, buried under layers of decisions made by people who had no interest in seeing this case solved. The truth wasn't hidden because it was complicated. It was hidden because it was inconvenient. And this part still gives people goosebumps. This all surfaced the same year Tupac's secret grave story exploded. Both of hip-hop's biggest ghosts came back to life in one year. Two mysteries that shaped an entire culture suddenly breathing again after decades underground. It makes you wonder, was this incompetence, or was the system built to make sure the truth stayed dead?
And they were always close. A dude named Psycho Mike is the one who told Poole about Muhammad. Psycho Mike's story was believed by a lot of people for a long time, but when his police interview leaked, it made the theory a lot shakier. Psycho Mike is a schizophrenic murderer who couldn't even identify Muhammad.
When investigators reopened Biggie's case with new forensic reconstruction tech, they didn't expect the mess they walked into. The data didn't match the old reports. Bullet holes that were never documented suddenly appeared in the scans. It was like the crime scene had been edited, not by time, but by human hands. Reports missing pages, photos with inconsistent timestamps, witness notes marked misplaced, even though every other case from that night was intact. One of the witnesses, who stayed quiet for years, finally admitted something heartbreaking. Their original statement wasn't just ignored, it was rewritten. Someone else's words were put in their mouth. And the way they described it, they said it felt like being erased from their own memory of that night.
I used to see Biggie all the time. Always pass through, he always drive through, always, like in the summer.
People always framed Biggie's killing as a gang retaliation or another chapter in the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. But the reopened case made that story feel too clean, too convenient. The pattern of evidence, what was missing, what suddenly reappeared, who stayed quiet, pointed to something bigger than street beef. It pointed upward, toward institutions and people in control of what the public was allowed to see.
Mack is one of the most notorious cops in LA history. Back in '93, he was given an award for heroism after he shot a drug dealer that allegedly threatened his partner, but later it turned out that they had lied about the whole situation and planted a gun on the dealer.
And this is where 2025 finally forced everyone to listen to Greg Kading, the retired LAPD detective who had already named the shooter years ago. Back then, his claims were treated like controversy bait. He was accused of pushing theories for headlines. But when the new digital reconstructions confirmed the same trajectory patterns he described, the same car placement, the same shooter mechanics, people had no choice but to take him seriously.
All kinds of rumors started flying about who was behind the hit, but nobody had any real answers. Biggie's security team tried to chase the shooter down after it happened, but they couldn't keep up through all the traffic and lost the shooter.
The identity he named wasn't someone shocking in terms of street reputation. What was shocking was the motive. It wasn't raw hatred, wasn't spontaneous violence. It was a paid hit wrapped inside a rivalry that was already spiraling, a setup that benefited people on both sides of the industry. The killer wasn't some unpredictable monster. He was someone selected, used, and then discarded once the heat got too high.
There were always rumors that he had something to do with Biggie getting killed, and now Kading says he knows for sure. Suge was already locked up when Biggie got killed, and Kading says he used his girlfriend to get the hit taken care of.
What makes the story even more painful is how predictable Kading said the whole thing was. He practically spoon-fed the information to the original task force years ago. He had statements, connections, timelines, and corroboration. Everything pointed to the same person, and still, nothing happened. The case didn't move an inch.
Hold on. My deepest assault to the Wallace family, Miss Wallace, Faith, Tatiana, and CJ. Little Biggie.
The explanation for that became terrifyingly clear in 2025. The people with the power to take it forward would have had to expose their own connections in the process. And instead of risking their careers, they let the truth rot.
Fortunately, after Biggie's funeral procession moved on, the relatively peaceful gathering was marred. 6 people were arrested for disorderly conduct by New York City police, who also resorted to using pepper spray to calm the crowd.
Once the forensic team rebuilt the scene using 3D trajectory mapping, something that wasn't possible in the late 90s, the shooter's profile became obvious. His angle, height, stance, the location of the vehicle, the timing between each shot, it lined up exactly with the account Kading had been pushing for over a decade.
I feel this is not necessary. You know, we coming here to represent for Biggie, not to start wilding like this.
The most chilling detail wasn't even the accuracy. It was the pattern of control behind the shooter's life. He wasn't some lone gunman. He was someone groomed for violence, pulled into the orbit of people who knew exactly how to manipulate him. Someone who responded to loyalty, fear, pressure, and most of all, direction. Every move he made that night fit the behavior of someone carrying out an order, not acting on impulse. By the time all this came out, the public wasn't just shocked, they were furious. Fans, writers, even people who didn't grow up with hip-hop all felt the same frustration. Biggie wasn't just killed by a person. He was killed by a system that shielded the person.
Did pull a move that a lot of people think is sketchy. Diddy was in the car ahead of Biggie and allegedly told his driver to run the red light outside the museum because he didn't want to sit out in the open.
The truth being revealed this late carried its own kind of heartbreak. It wasn't justice. It wasn't closure. It was a reminder that someone could be one of the biggest artists in the world and still have their case intentionally buried like they were nobody. And the fact that this revelation surfaced the same year Tupac's hidden grave and long-suppressed family details came out made everything feel connected, like someone finally removed the lid from a secret hip-hop was never meant to see. The answers are here now, but they don't heal. They haunt. In a random act of violence, he died in a system designed to protect the wrong people.
And a retired LAPD detective says that Diddy is the one who ordered the hit on Tupac in Vegas. In 2006, the investigation into Biggie's death was reopened because the city wanted more evidence to defend themselves against a lawsuit.
The thing about these cases, Biggie, Tupac, the whole messy universe around them, is that the closer you get to the truth, the more you realize you're not dealing with one story. You're dealing with a web. And in 2025, that web finally started shaking in a way that made a lot of people very nervous. Because once you start tugging at the strings, you discover there are names, big names, expensive names, that have been floating around in whispers for almost 3 decades. The kind of names people brought up in low voices at industry parties, then laughed off like they were joking. Except nobody was really joking.
You murder someone, there's a family. There are people out there that feel a loss that can never, ever be, taken care of. I mean, it's an emptiness that can never be, replaced.
See, when Biggie's case resurfaced this year, suddenly those names weren't just rumors anymore. They were back on the table. Not because someone wanted them there, but because too many things lined up at once. Old interviews, new forensics, and insiders who finally decided they were too old to keep swallowing secrets that had been eating them alive. One producer even said, "I kept this in for 27 years, and my doctor said it's probably why I have acid reflux." Tragic, but honestly believable. The hip-hop world has carried trauma like it's part of the costume.
I think it's very beautiful, and I think it's tragic. I think it's beautiful to see that a lot of people from this neighborhood have this kind of love for him. I think it's beautiful that these little kids are going to come out here to see him. But I think it's tragic that they have to see him like this.
And the deeper investigators dug, the more obvious it became that fear and money had been running the show the whole time. Entire narratives were shaped by people trying to protect their own power. If something didn't match their version of events, it was pushed aside. If a witness didn't cooperate, well, suddenly their statement got lost. If a piece of evidence was a little too revealing, it somehow ended up sealed, mislabeled, or filed under the wrong case number. Someone even found an evidence envelope inside a box labeled broken printers, which pretty much tells you everything about the level of chaos we're dealing with.
Biggie's mom had filed a $500 million wrongful death suit, and LA definitely didn't want to pay up. A detective named Greg Kading worked on the case for years, and he thinks that Suge Knight ordered the Biggie hit because Diddy's the one who put a bag on Tupac's head.
But the real earthquake hit when insiders started talking in 2025, really talking. Not the vague, half-coded hints they'd been throwing around for years. Actual details, actual names, stories of label meetings where tempers were as dangerous as the money on the table. People from death row who suddenly weren't afraid to say what they saw, what they heard, and what they were asked to forget. Former gang affiliates who described conversations they'd held onto for decades like tiny pieces of poison they couldn't spit out.
I miss him. He's going to be well missed, you know? Love him like a brother.
That's when the connections became too clear to ignore. Music, gangs, money, law enforcement, it wasn't separate worlds. It was one big tangled system where everybody needed something and nobody wanted the truth to get in the way. And honestly, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Everything starts making sense, but in the worst possible way. And then there's the forensic part of 2025. The technology alone feels like it was built just to embarrass everyone who worked this case in the 90s. We're talking AI-assisted mapping that reconstructed the exact angles of the bullets, the distance between cars, the speed of every vehicle involved, even the slight shift Biggie made right before the shots were fired. It was like rewinding time, not symbolically, literally. They synced old witness testimonies with voice stress analysis, matched them with precise timelines, and suddenly the inconsistencies weren't mistakes. They were patterns. And the patterns showed exactly what people had been afraid to admit for so long. Earlier investigators had everything they needed. They had the evidence. They had the statements. They had the motive. They even had the name. But nothing moved. Nothing happened. No arrests were made. No one was held accountable.
Rumors about Diddy being involved ever since it happened. One of the major theories about Tupac's death is that it was revenge for a beating he put on a Crip named Orlando Anderson a few hours before the shooting. After Biggie died, rumors were going around that the Southside Crips were the ones who took him out.
Forensic teams also pulled out old footage and ran it through enhancement tools that didn't exist in 1997. Details that were invisible back then, license plate numbers, reflections on car windows, bystanders in the background, finally came into focus. One expert said the footage revealed enough truth to make your stomach drop. That's the kind of sentence that tells you people knew exactly what they were avoiding for decades.
Keith D was moving major weight in Compton in the 90s and got booked in a federal drug case the same year Biggie died. Kading brought him in and threatened him with a 25 to life sentence to get Keith to talk about the Biggie murder.
And that leads to the heaviest part of this whole story. There are still no arrests, not in 2025. Not even after all the revelations, all the confirmations, all the evidence laid out like a confession letter. The shooter? Untouchable now. Time took care of that. The people who orchestrated the things happening behind the scenes, protected by loopholes, shielded by legal decay, or just plain gone. Witnesses died. Files disappeared. Memories faded. The case didn't run out of truth. It ran out of time.
And Little Kim, I can't forget Little Kim. That's my girl. I can't forget Little Kim.
Pass through, always, and always holler out the window. You say, Biggie! He holler out, he say, peace, you know? He was real cool. Always pass through, beat the horn. Him, the whole Junior Mafia crew, you know?
The public reaction was a mix of relief, anger, and that familiar heartbreak hip-hop fans have learned to carry. On one hand, we finally got answers. On the other, we got them at a point where they don't lead to justice. It's like being handed the last piece of a puzzle after the frame is already broken. Families who waited almost 30 years finally know what happened, but that knowledge came with no accountability, no closure, no court date circled on a calendar. Just the painful realization that sometimes the truth shows up too late to matter.
Kading says while she was telling them what went down, she had tears in her eyes because she was so afraid. Snitching on Suge could be a death sentence if he found out, so the woman definitely had a good reason to be scared. Kading says that she pretended to be a legal assistant so she could talk to Suge in jail without their conversations being recorded.
And yet, this whole thing changed hip-hop history in a way nobody expected. For years, these stories were treated like myths, conspiracy theories, or fan obsession. Now the facts are out there, and the narrative has been rewritten. Biggie and Tupac weren't just victims of a rivalry. They were caught in a much larger machine. A machine powered by ego, violence, money, and decisions made by people who never once thought about the long-term consequences.
According to documents from the LAPD, Suge worked with her to help him coordinate the murder.
Some careers took a hit. Some reputations shattered completely. People who thought they were safe behind old lies suddenly found themselves dragged back into the spotlight. And honestly, the community needed that. Because hip-hop deserved better. Biggie and Tupac deserve better. And after everything we've learned, everything that finally surfaced in 2025, there's one question that sticks with everyone who follows this story closely. If the truth survived nearly 30 years of silence, what else is still buried? Because if this could stay hidden for so long, untouched, unchallenged, and protected by so many layers, then who knows what other stories are waiting underneath the noise? Subscribe, like, and comment why you like this video for a chance to win a new Apple MacBook.